So my name is Jean Lee. I'm the director of the Hyundai Motor Korea Foundation Center for Korean History and Public Policy here at the Wilson Center. And I'm absolutely delighted to be joined today by Congressman Jin Park. And he's a member of the 21st National Assembly of South Korea. He's currently serving his fourth term. And in this capacity, he's serving on the National Assembly's Foreign Affairs and Unification Committee as a member of the opposition People's Power Party. He has quite an illustrious career in public service and politics. It dates back to the 1990s, to his years in the Blue House, and then in the National Assembly. And he's been serving in leadership roles on the Foreign Affairs Committee, Trade, and National Unification Committees during those previous years as an assemblyman. He's built very strong ties with counterparts all over the world. And I would include, I did not know this, the Korea-Britain Society for 10 years.
Right.
And I was surprised to see, but not, I shouldn't say surprised, but I was happy to see that you had earned the title of Honorary Commander of the British Empire, Queen Elizabeth II.
Yes.
So before rejoining the National Assembly recently for this current term, Congressman Park spent 8 years as a scholar leading the Asia Future Institute think tank and as a chairman of the Korea America Association. And I'm proud that in his capacity as a scholar, he rejoined the Wilson Center as a global fellow. So we're absolutely happy to have him. And I believe we're also going to be joined today by Hyung-do Che, who is a first-term member of the National Assembly, serving on the Culture, Sports, and Tourism Committee and the Special Committee on Budget and Account of the Republic of Korea. And I am proud to say that he is a former journalist and was posted here in Washington as a correspondent for the Munha-ilbo. So certainly has covered these issues that we'll be talking about today as a journalist and seen them up front as a member of the government and in politics as well. So Congressman Park, it's Congressman Che, it's just an absolute delight to have you join us here today. And I will mention that it's just a few days before President Moon Jae-in arrives in Washington for a summit with President Biden. And so I'm sure we will talk about or hear from you about that, as well as what you've been doing to try to improve the, how do I put this, the vaccine supply globally. So we look forward to hearing you speak about that today. Thank you so much.
I'm delighted to be back in Washington, and as a member of the Asian Wilson Center's Global Fellowship Program, I'm so glad to be back in your program, the Asia program, to talk about Korea-U.S. alliance. And my topic is how we can revitalize our alliance. Given the new administration in Washington, how Korea and the United States can solve the problems together and then move into the future. There are challenges and opportunities, of course, and I would like to give my thought on these 5 issues that I'm thinking. First of all, the most important change that we can perceive from Seoul is that there's a new government in Washington, President Biden, who's announcing that the U.S. will implement its foreign policies based on the recovery of U.S. global leadership and strengthen cooperation with its allies instead of taking America first approach. President Joe Biden and President Moon Jae-in are scheduled to meet in several days' time in Washington for a first summit meeting between the two leaders face to face. And in the telephone conversation last time, the two leaders agree that Korea-U.S. alliance serves as a linchpin for security and prosperity in the Indo-Pacific region. And I think that this linchpin role by Korea would have to continue and should contribute to the real progress of many issues that we are faced with. First and foremost is that Korea and the United States should cope with the worsening coronavirus pandemic. This is an urgent priority. South Korea and the United States should actively collaborate and expedite vaccine distribution. You may remember that South Korea has delivered 750,000 diagnostic kits and 2 million masks to the United States initially when the coronavirus pandemic erupted. Both countries should continue to work closely in the scientific and medical areas to develop vaccines and ensure widespread accessibility to safe and effective vaccines through vaccine swap and vaccine partnership. I will come back to this point later. Second is that both countries should restore mutual trust and pursue a common strategy towards North Korea. The alliance in the first place is predicated on such core values as democracy, free markets, and rule of law, and human rights. Our bilateral partnership should be a predictable and mutually respectful and value-driven companionship rather than unpredictable, one-sided, and transactional leadership. The Korea-US alliance should focus on deterring North Korea's provocations and denuclearizing the North through consistent policy, including sanctions and negotiations. And despite the two summits between US and North Korea in Singapore and Hanoi, there has been no real progress on the denuclearization of North Korea. On the contrary, North Korea's nuclear and missile capabilities have been visibly aggrandized. This is a clear and present danger to the security of South Korea, the United States, and Japan. My next point is how to deal with China. The two countries, as an ally, the Korea-US alliance should pursue a coordinated strategy to deal with China. President Biden emphasized at one point that the most effective way to deal with China is to build a united front of US allies and partners. President Biden perceives that the rise of China poses the greatest strategic challenge to the US and its allies. Although he would seek to cooperate with China on such global issues as non-proliferation, climate change, and health issues. The Korean government should make clear policy decisions instead of taking ambiguous positions between the US and China. South Korea should consolidate its alliance with the US while encouraging China to accept rules-based international relations and practices. At the same time, and this is also important, that Korea-US ties should also upgrade cooperation with Japan. South Korea and Japan should resume meaningful political dialogues to resolve the pending issues, and a renewed trilateral cooperative partnership among South Korea, U.S., and Japan will facilitate peace and stability in Northeast Asia. My first point is human rights. The Korea-U.S. alliance should contribute to the advancement of universal human rights, in particular, concerted efforts to monitor and address serious human rights violation in North Korea should be prioritized. As a leading democracy and human rights in Asia, Korea should work closely with the United States to improve the human rights situation in the region. Advocating democracy and human rights in Asia is important in this respect. The last point, my fifth point, is that Korea-U.S. alliance should enhance global peace and security. This means that Korea and the United States should expand its alliance into a global partnership. Korea and U.S. made enormous sacrifices to fight against communism, communist aggression, and protect peace and freedom during the Korean War. Now, South Korea is the sixth largest trade partner of the U.S., and we have the free trade agreement, which is 9 years old. This is a bilateral free trade agreement. I think it's a win-win arrangement for both countries, which amplifies trade and investment between the two major economies. And I think we should continue to expand and strengthen our economic partnership between the two countries. And now the new global economic partnership between Korea and the United States will be expanded into the new industries, the fourth industrial revolution, including artificial intelligence, big data, and other areas, and also electric batteries and semiconductors, and so on. So these are all strategic cooperation between Korea and the United States. Now, I would like to focus on the vaccine partnership between Korea and the US. The situation with COVID-19 is grave in Korea and in many other countries, with a daily number of confirmed cases showing no signs of abating and expanding instead. The situation in the United States looks much better now, and you have decided to throw off the masks in outside and also maybe inside. Presently, in the case of Korea, Korea's vaccination rate is relatively low now. It's less than 10%. Its ranking is 35th among the 37 OECD member countries. The United States and Britain and Israel and other countries have already vaccinated more than half of their populations, entered diplomatic war early on, and devoted all their energy to securing sufficient vaccines to protect the lives and safety of the people. Korea, despite its early success of the K-quarantine, is now behind in the fierce global competition to secure vaccines, and the people continue suffering from the ripple effects of the pandemic, in addition to the already constricted economy. Securing COVID-19 vaccine is a matter of vital importance, directly related to a nation's security and its economy. Particularly urgent is the need for a close partnership with the United States for vaccine development and production and supply. The United States is the world leader in terms of verified safe vaccines based on messenger RNA technology. The products such as produced by Pfizer and Moderna. The Republic of Korea and the United States, as a staunch blood-tied allies, share the core values of democracy, market economy, the rule of law, and human rights. A reciprocal Korea-US vaccine partnership should be in place, including a vaccine swap between the two countries, whereby Korea receives urgent supplies of American surplus vaccines first and repay with available identical vaccines later. In order to achieve the Korean-American vaccine partnership, the Republic of Korea government should positively consider participating in the Quad, which is an informal coalition of democratic countries in the region, such as the U.S., Japan, Australia, and India, to accelerate the end of the COVID-19 and to safeguard peace and prosperity in the Indo-Pacific region. The Quad partners are making concerted efforts to expand the manufacturing of safe and effective COVID-19 vaccines, to which Korea can make significant contributions. At the same time, in the middle of this cutthroat global competition over supply chains, Korea is strengthening the ROK-US cooperation, which includes increasing Korean investment in semiconductors and electric batteries production in the United States. Likewise, the strong US support can make Korea Asia's vaccine hub for development, production, and supply of advanced and authorized made in Korea vaccines through contractual manufacturing and or technological licensing for the benefit of billions of population in the region and beyond. I had a chance to look at the Wilson Center seminar, the global vaccine issue this morning, which was very helpful for all of us to understand how important is this global cooperation to overcome the pandemic crisis and what can be done, especially to those countries which are running short of available vaccines. So I think that this is not just one country's problem, but a global problem. And in the case of Korea, the Korea-US alliance can certainly play a very important role in solving the problem. This is not one-sided, but as I mentioned, this is a reciprocal relationship. Korean pharmaceutical companies are at the highest level of manufacturing patented and generic products by global standards. Chapter 5 of the Korea-US Free Trade Agreement stipulates that the parties share a commitment to promoting the development of and facilitating access to high-quality patented and generic pharmaceutical products and medical devices as a means of continuing to improve the health of their nationals. This is a very important clause in the free trade partnership between Korea and the United States. As the chairman of Foreign Affairs and Trade Committee of the Korean National Assembly, I personally was involved in ratifying this Korea-US FTA, and we looked into the Chapter 5 regarding this pharmaceutical products in 2008, 2009, which was more than 10 years ago. But at that time, I had no clue that it will be later applied to the vaccine swap between Korea and the United States. So in that sense, this is a very unique and important clause that defines the future cooperation of vaccine partnership between the two countries. So I think that now is the high time to put this into practice to overcome the pandemic coronavirus crisis. The upcoming Korea-U.S. summit meeting in Washington, D.C. should serve as a milestone to forge a symbiotic vaccine alliance between the two countries for the safer and healthier future of humankind. Let me finally explain why Korea needs to consider joining the Quad, the informal strategic coalition of democratic countries. The essence of the Quad spirit, I think, is free and open Indo-Pacific strategy to uphold the democratic values and repudiate coercion. The rule of law, the freedom of navigation and overflight, the peaceful resolution of disputes, democratic values, and territorial integrity are the key components of the proposed Quad spirit. And these are essential requirements for the national interest of South Korea. The problem is that Korea is being alienated from these multilateral initiatives to reshape the regional order. So I think that based on three compelling reasons, Korea should consider participating in the Quad coalition. First, Korea should reinvigorate its alliance with the U.S. by resolving dissonances and promoting shared values, which I've mentioned: freedom, democracy, human rights, and rule of law, which also reflect the Quad spirit. Key to protecting democracy is freedom and human rights. As a vibrant democracy in Asia, South Korea should advocate freedom of speech and speak out on human rights violations in the region. Second reason is that Korea should leverage the combined solidarity of the Quad to deal with the security threats on the Korean Peninsula and to effectively respond to regional security issues. The Quad member countries, directly or indirectly, participated in the Korean War, sacrificing for and contributing to freedom and peace in South Korea. The South China Sea is a vital strategic area for South Korea, as 30% to 40% of Korean exports and 90% of Korean energy imports flow through this crucial maritime zone. Escalation of military tension in the area will adversely impact its economy. Third, South Korea should explore and expand new economic opportunities for the future, in addition to producing semiconductors and electric batteries. The combined GDP of the four Quad economies amounts to $31 trillion, accounting for 35% of the global GDP. South Korea's trade dependence on the Quad is around 25%, equivalent to that of China. The four Quad nations are, much like Korea, highly reliant on trade with China. Therefore, the argument that Korea's high dependence on trade with China makes joining the Quad an impediment to its partnership with China I think, is invalid. South Korea is a dynamic economic powerhouse located in the geopolitical pivot of Northeast Asia. The strategic choice that Korea makes between the US and China will significantly affect the political, economic, and security environment of the Indo-Pacific region. Korea joining the Quad is only common sense and an inevitable course of history, in my view. It is only natural for a state that has shared values of liberal democracy and rule of law to join the Quad and make a penta, which is a group of 5. Korea should not retract into being an outlier, but take a leading role in the formulation of a new democratic order in the region. So let me stop here, and then I hope we can have a following Q&A on what I have just mentioned. Thank you for listening.
So we'll move into the Q&A, and for this, I'm happy to have 2 of my colleagues joining us. We have Abraham Denmark, who's director of the Asia program here at the Wilson Center and leads our research on Indo-Pacific. And we have Shihoko Goto, who's our deputy director for geoeconomics. And I'm happy to have them join this discussion and for us to broaden it out into discussion about the Indo-Pacific, as well as what you can tell us about what we should be watching for with the upcoming summit. Can I turn this over to Abe?
Thanks so much, Jean. Thank you for all the work you do with us on the Korea Peninsula. And thank you so much, Congressman Park, for joining us again. It's wonderful to see you again and to welcome you to Washington. I wish we could do this in person, but I'm glad that you're keeping yourself safe, and I hope you get some time to get a vaccine shot while you're here. I wanted to ask, since you're here and you've been talking so much about vaccines and the issues that play, I'm wondering if you could talk a bit about the vaccine diplomacy that's been happening in the Indo-Pacific, with China being very out front and explicit in using promises of vaccines as part of a broader effort to build its geopolitical influence, even though it turns out that its vaccine isn't as effective as some others. And with the President Biden's announcement of intentions to begin exporting US-based vaccines around the world, including in Asia, I'm curious if you could just talk about how you think this is playing out and what, if any, effect it's having on broader geopolitical issues in the Indo-Pacific.
And I think that vaccine is rapidly becoming a kind of global public goods, and is being used as from a geopolitical perspective. China, as you said, is distributing its own vaccines to countries like Brazil and Indonesia and other countries in the Asian region. And that certainly makes the United States awkward in terms of the capability of the United States as a leading and pioneering country producing the most advanced vaccines, and the new policy lines of the President Biden, the Biden administrations, that the United States would respect the allies and create a multilateral cooperative network to deal with China. As I pointed out in my presentation. So this is in a way a geopolitical development that has lots of significance. But in the case, the country like Korea, which is an important ally of the United States in Northeast Asia, as I said, initially was very successful in dealing with the quarantine issues. We kept very strict social distancing, and then everybody was wearing masks inside and outside of the building. And then that made Korea as an advanced medical country that can deal with the impact of this coronavirus. But somehow in the middle of last year and in the late last year, the Korea just was lagging behind in the race for securing the vaccines on a global competition. So there is a growing feeling in Korea that given the improved situation in the United States and perhaps the surplus vaccines that the United States can find, perhaps the alliance can play a very important role in ameliorating the problems that Korea is faced with. And this solution can be made in a reciprocal basis. That is, the United States can help support and supply the surplus vaccines to the countries like Korea, the important ally, and Korea can pay back with available vaccines, either through domestic production in the medium and long term, or by securing vaccines from abroad. But this is not just the solution, which is kind of a short-term issue. But in the medium and long term, I think that this partnership, the vaccine partnership between Korea and the United States, should become a model partnership. And in fact, vaccine alliance between the two countries to enable Korea to produce its own vaccines, made in Korea vaccines, based on technological cooperation with the United States, and become an Asian hub of vaccine production, so that this alliance can contribute to the medical and the health improvement in Asian region and beyond. So I think that we are at a very critical juncture now, and how the alliance, the Korea-US alliance, can take these challenges, can tackle these challenges, and to find out solution, I think is very important, not only for two countries, but also to the whole world.
Can I ask, have there been any specific South Korean companies identified as being ready to take on this role with American companies? I've seen Moderna cited as one of the companies in the U.S. that might be approached, perhaps Pfizer. But on the South Korean side, how much do we know about the South Korean companies and their readiness to take on this role? And I have a second question, which is, sorry, Abe, which is, does this vision extend beyond, you said global hub, does this vision extend beyond South Korea and the Korean Peninsula, or should I say South Korea? And does it include a plan to produce vaccines that would go beyond South Korea?
Right. To give you examples of this vaccine partnership, we have a company in Korea, which is the largest pharmaceutical company, Samsung Biologics, which is now negotiating with American company, in my understanding, Moderna, to produce vaccines within the Republic of Korea. And I think that if this is confirmed and implemented, will greatly contribute to the expansion of a vaccine partnership between the two countries. That's a good example. The other is SK Bioscience, based in Andong, northern Gyeongsang province, which is actually now producing the AstraZeneca vaccine, which is a different kind of technological products compared to Pfizer or Moderna. This vaccine was originally invented in the UK, and the SK Bioscience is now in the middle of negotiating with Novavax, another vaccine company, to produce that within Korea. So there are cases of corporate activities, vaccine partnership, that are emerging. And I think that there are many more opportunities for this kind of similar vaccine cooperation between the two countries. And the idea of creating vaccine hub in Korea is that it is not just Korea, but other countries as well, that this technological cooperation and the vaccine production can be expanded to other countries as Korea as a model. And this can only be achieved through Korea-U.S. alliance partnership. Therefore, what kind of new model that Korea can present to the world, I think it depends largely upon the decisions by the two governments, Korea and the United States, as staunch allies, to overcome and cope with the global challenges of pandemic crisis. So I think that the vaccine hub in Asia, in the location of Korea, can become a kind of epicenter of a global vaccine accessibility, which is an important purpose of all the nations in the region, also including the Quad, the informal coalition of democracies that I mentioned.
And can I just ask if you've had any response during your few days here in the United States? Do you feel that there are receptive partners, and can we expect an announcement later this week when President Moon comes to Washington?
Yes, we met with the members of the Congress and also people in the government, and we had a very productive discussion on this vaccine partnership and vaccine hub. Korea is a vaccine hub in Asia. In fact, some members in Congress have already expressed their support for providing vaccines, American vaccines, to Korea. Congressman Tom Suozzi from Long Island and Congresswoman Carolyn Maloney from New York have written their letters to the White House and to the State Department supporting this vaccine partnership and vaccine cooperation. And I think it's very encouraging gesture and a message that is very much appreciated by the Korean government and the Korean people. And it will certainly contribute to the Korea-U.S. summit, which will take place in several days' time. I also talked with the former director of the CDC, Center for Disease Control, who has suggested that this Asian hub idea through Korea and the United States, through cooperation between the two countries, will be able to make Korea supply more than 5 billion vaccine doses in 2022, next year, and facilitate knowledge transfer to other manufacturers globally. And the former director of the CDC, Mr. Tom Frieden, believes that Korea can provide resources and leadership in Asia and beyond So I think that this hub arrangement idea is a very serious proposal that both countries, Korea and the United States, should look into and try to realize. And I hope that in the upcoming summit meeting between the two leaders, this idea of a vaccine hub could be reflected in the final statement. In fact, President Moon Jae-in himself mentioned a couple of days ago that Korea should become a hub of vaccine production globally. So I think there is a growing ideas and consensus between the two countries about what kind of future we can make together and how we can overcome this pandemic crisis through making Korea a vaccine hub in Asia.
It's interesting because I should mention you are from, both of you are from the opposition party, but it seems that this might be one issue that has bipartisan support with the ruling party. Is that true? Is that a good assessment? Can you tell me how this has been handled in the National Assembly, and has it been handled with bipartisan support?
I'm glad you said that because, of course, back in Korea, in the National Assembly, we disagree on many things. Economic policy or the vaccine policy, North Korea, or other things. But vaccine is not a political, it shouldn't be a political issue. And also, this is a very important national interest issue. Therefore, we think that bipartisan efforts should be made into this vaccine debate so that we can move in the right direction into the future by mobilizing the existing capabilities of Korea to produce biopharmaceuticals in large scale based on technological cooperation with the United States. So I think that this is a very important bipartisan global issue that Korea should really make a lot of efforts, and so is the United States.
Shihoko, can we bring you into this conversation and this discussion?
Yeah, so thank you again, Congressman, for your time and your insight into all the issues that will be coming to the forefront on the summit meeting Friday, and highlighting this issue of vaccine diplomacy and the vaccine hub proposal that Korea has put forward. Just over a year ago, the United States was actually scrambling to get critical medical supplies, including PCR kits. I live in Maryland, as I mentioned earlier, and the governor of Maryland, Larry Hogan, is actually married to a Korean American. And there was this connection between Korea and the United States, and Maryland was able to secure a lot of the supplies, most notably the PCR testing kits from Korea. And for a brief moment, Maryland was the envy of all the 49 other states of the United States for being able to tap into that personal connection they had. What is interesting, though, with this whole pandemic is that it's rapidly changing. The virus itself is changing. What is needed is changing. The supply and demand of critical goods is changing. Who would have thought that the United States would actually be considering an overcapacity and an oversupply of vaccines, and how it can use that as a tool as a tool for diplomacy as much as for to secure its own economic and health security. At the same time, what the pandemic has done is really made the United States in particular, and all the countries, think about what it is a critical supply. And here in this country, the critical supplies are pharmaceuticals, critical minerals, high capacity batteries, and also semiconductors. Semiconductors is something that really the United States will continue to struggle with, and indeed the world. And Korea has an upper hand in that. It can really has an important, the world cannot run literally without Korean chips. How do you think the whole idea of, on the one hand, vaccine adjusting really this supply of vaccines in the world, currently led by the United States. Is there an opportunity to leverage Korea's pole position in the semiconductor industry so that it doesn't simply, we don't simply talk about reciprocal vaccine partnership, but it's a bigger reciprocal technology partnership between the United States and Korea?
Yes, I think that, as I mentioned in the presentation, that this should be a two-way relationship instead of a unilateral support by the United States. And certainly the strengths that Korea has economically is in the area of semiconductors and electric batteries production. Together with TSMC in Taiwan, Korea and Taiwan take up about almost 45% of the global semiconductor production. So this is certainly an advantage and strengths of Korean economy. So I think that we can support this global supply chain in close cooperation with the United States, so that we can supply more batteries, electric batteries, and semiconductors for the American economy by investing into the United States. And I think the companies like Samsung Electronics and other companies are certainly considering to expand its business in the U.S. And that's certainly what strengthens the basis of our alliance on the economic front. And that may help the U.S. Decision to enter into a symbiotic vaccine partnership or vaccine alliance with the Republic of Korea, because this is mutually beneficial. If not quid pro quo, I think that it could be a kind of expanded basis of alliance development. Therefore, I think that the summit this time between President Joe Biden and President Moon Jae-in could set a kind of a milestone in expanding the basis of our alliance, including the benefits in the economic area and also the medical and scientific area.
I was wondering, Congressman Park, if you could perhaps put the upcoming summit with President Moon and President Biden into a broader context. So what do you see the summit as meaning for our alliance? And how do you see the alliance as progressing over the last few years? And do you see that this summit will have a significant impact on the alliance, or do you see more continuity with what we've already seen before?
Well, I hope that the summit meeting this time between Korea and the United States can restore a good balance in dealing with different issues faced by both countries. How to deal with North Korea, I mentioned initially in my presentation, is that North Korea is our common threat. Therefore, alliance should maintain its capability to deter any provocations or aggression by North Korea. And the biggest threat is nothing other than the nuclear threat coming from the North. Therefore, the complete denuclearization should be the end goal of the bilateral cooperation between two countries in dealing with the North. And I know that the Biden administration has come out with a policy review on North Korea recently. And it looks like it's a kind of combination of diplomacy and deterrence. I think that this is a reasonable approach, and I very much hope that North Korea can find a chance to make substantial progress in the denuclearization. If North Korea, however, refuses the new policy review by the Biden administration, then I think that the only thing left is sanctions and pressure. North Korea should be very much aware of that consequence, and I hope that this summit can produce a one voice to send to North Korea so that they don't have the wrong message coming into them. Now, on the economic front, as Shihoko has mentioned, it's very important assets of our strategic alliance. The trade and investment between the two countries have consistently grown thanks to the Chorus FTA, which is a win-win arrangement. And I think that these trends should continue in the future, despite the constriction of the economic activities due to the global pandemic crisis. And the new area of strategic goods, such as electronic batteries and semiconductors, in which Korea is very strong, I think that should provide a strong basis upon which the alliance can develop into the future, because that will create a stronger basis of our partnership. Therefore, these are the issues that will be discussed in the upcoming summit. And of course, the vaccine cooperation should make some, the discussion on vaccine cooperation should make some tangible result and outcome to move into the direction where we can realize the vaccine partnership and making Korea a substantial central hub of vaccine production in Asia. So I think that the summit in Washington this time is really important summit and very timely and crucial summit, perhaps, and should set a milestone in our relationship.
Can I just ask one question, which is, what do you think the North Koreans will be watching for with this summit? Are there any things that you think they'll be watching for that might change or affect Kim Jong-un's next ever thinking and approach?
I think that North Korea will certainly be interested in knowing what kind of consensus will come out of the summit meeting between Korea and the United States. During the Trump administration, we have seen this high-level kind of top-down style of diplomacy by American government, and so was North Korea. So they met in Singapore and Hanoi twice, but no real substantial progress has been made. And I think that we should learn the lessons from the trial and errors of this diplomacy under the Trump government. So I think that in the new administration, Biden administration, the approach could be something like bottom-up approach based on thorough preparation and a concrete roadmap for negotiating with North Korea. And as I said in my presentation, the most important thing is whether North Korea can make real actions towards the denuclearization. And if not, and I think that the past pattern could be repeated. And I think that that should be avoided. And in order to do that, North Korea should make a right decision. And I think that this might be a very important moment for North Korea to make such decision. And I hope that we can enter into a more productive cycle of negotiation with North Korea so that we can reach ultimately the goal of complete denuclearization of North Korea.
Congressman, I want to thank you for taking the time out during what is a very hectic visit to Washington, D.C. I know you have a lot that you want to accomplish, and I want to wish you luck. And by you, I mean South Korea, as the vaccines are rolling out. I know it's been very slow. I think the last statistic I saw was 1.8% of the population had been vaccinated. So wishing you all the best there, and we'll look forward to seeing what comes out of these discussions about a possible vaccine partnership and a role that South Korea can play more broadly, regionally, perhaps even globally, in trying to spur and encourage the development of more vaccines. And certainly welcome your insights on the upcoming summit, which we're all watching very closely, including those in North Korea. So thank you so much. I'm sorry that we can't meet in person, but hopefully next time we will be able to host you at the Wilson Center, and as well as seeing you in South Korea. Abe, is there anything you wanted to say to close us out?
Oh, I want to point out that the current rate of vaccination in Korea is 7.2%, which is less than 10%, and we hope that we can expedite this speed of vaccination in the future based on Korea-U.S. Vaccine Alliance.
I agree. I think there's a lot that we can do to help each other on a wide variety of different issues. I'm a firm champion of our alliance, and I applaud you for your leadership on these issues, and especially your leadership on the vaccine aspect of our relationship. We're very proud that you are part of the Wilson Center family, and that you're doing such great work for your country and for our alliance. And we're thrilled to see you again, Jin Park. So I hope next time I can see you in person in Korea, we can go to a KBO game, and everybody will be vaccinated.
Yeah, I hope so.